Pack up your suitcase. It's time to go back in history. We're looking at electric pianos. We quite literally have a suitcase electric piano behind us, the Yamaha CP-70. We're asking the question, whatever happened to electric pianos? Is it the same thing as digital pianos? I don't think so.
No.
Stick around.
Hi, this is Ted with Alamo Music Center in beautiful downtown San Antonio, Texas.
I'm Patrick Marr. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channels, check out our other videos, sign up for notifications, like our videos, leave us comments. We appreciate your support and we love to interact with you.
A different kind of piano video today.
It is, and it's one that I think we've alluded to many times in some of these videos, our obsession with the electric piano.
Yeah.
And
truly an electric piano.
And if she told you to pack up your suitcases and leave, this would be the first thing to go, right?
This would be one. Yeah. This and and a Fender Rhodes suitcase.
Yeah. So it's interesting when you see these actually folded up and you know, on the move. They look like two giant suitcases. This one quite literally folds apart. The string harp section comes off in one section, and then the keys stay on the other side. And you have two handles, and it's much too heavy for one person to carry.
This was an exciting thing for us to get into the store, and what we've done with it is we've taken the top off, we've taken off the key slip and the cheek blocks, and we didn't do anything to it other than set it up, because this is going to kind of be our internal project, and it'll come back in other videos when it gets brand new looking, but right now it works and it plays great. We have a few things to do to it, like tune it and stuff like that. Plugged it in, everything works. The dual channels, the tremolo, the whole EQ pad. And what I've always liked about this instrument, what makes it great, is you don't have to turn it on to enjoy it. You can just sit down and play it like a regular piano. It does have a Yamaha grand piano action in it. One of the main differences is that the weight is a little bit different on the action, because the hammers are not regular piano hammers. They're actually covered in leather.
Yeah, no, and it just sounds very cool acoustically in the room, but sounds incredible when you do plug it in. But let's rewind. So the electric piano is a really interesting instrument. You know, for my generation, a lot of, most musicians, I would say at some point had to realize that there was a difference between like an electric piano and like a digital piano, or, we're surrounded by electronics today. And really an electric piano doesn't fall in the category of an electronic.
No, it doesn't, because what it is it actually has a tone generator built into it that is essentially picked up by a pickup and then amplified.
It's a mechanic. It's an electromechanic. And so, it's a lot like an electric guitar. That was also a lesson, at some point growing up, learning about, okay, an electric guitar isn't quite like a digital piano where, it plugs in and you get sound. Right. It's like, oh wait, there's strings being picked up by, these little magnets here underneath the strings. And if you get that signal amplified through an amplifier, it amplifies the strings and you get this really cool sound on an electric guitar. It's kind of the same.
Well, then you have signal processing capabilities.
And it's interesting that same exact signal flow was done before the electric guitar, really, on some of the first electric pianos.
It was. There was a combination of, the main piano was manufactured by Bechstein, C. Bechstein, and I believe that Telefunken took the concept of their small microphones without a membrane and lined one up for each key,
underneath
so to speak,
strings,
underneath
right.
the strings, and then ran it through compressors and tubes and all that kind of stuff, and then had it go through another tube amp. But they wired them in series of 18 notes,
mm-hmm.
and it's kind of a similar fashion to this. It's really interesting. There's not a whole lot of those around. There's only a couple of them left, and they're in the Vienna Museum, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a few recordings of them out there.
So it was kind of something that didn't catch on. It was like, okay, this can take the place. It's less expensive than a grand piano, and it was the idea of using electricity on a.
It was kind of invented with the idea for it to be a piano to go with a stage band.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew straight up front, we're starting to get an amplified guitar now. We can get an amplified piano and not have to make them so big, not have to put a soundboard, not need all that support in there.
And this was in, but you're skipping ahead to the
No,
60s,
this is
70s?
in the 30s.
Oh, okay.
This
So
is in
even back
1930.
then.
This was kind of the Bechstein idea, was because stage bands were popular.
Okay.
And you always had the one instrument that was bulky and you could never really bring with you was what? The piano.
Yeah.
And the Hammond organ as B3 was just about starting up. It wasn't that big yet. I mean, they'd come out in the late 30s. So everyone's focusing to try to get some kind of amplified piano or a loud portable organ or something to go with a stage band. And so that's kind of where this came from. Also, Hammond invented that, actually it's kind of like a synthesizer thing. The Nova chord, I think is what they called it. And but the Helpenstiel made one too.
Yeah.
At the peak, to accelerate back up to the 60s and 70s as these were being developed, the leaders in development were Yamaha, Kawai, and primarily Helpenstiel. Helpenstiel made his own piano pickups first and then applied them to other people's pianos and made his own pianos to kind of match his electronics.
And it's interesting, there was different philosophies behind building these two, because the ultimate goal was how do we replace a piano on the stage, and really out of that idea came a whole new instrument. They created something that wasn't around. An electric piano has a very distinct sound. Watching the Beatles get back,
get fired up listening to Fender Rhodes, brand new out of the box.
They open up a brand new 73
suitcase,
suitcase, and the year is 1969 in the video, and Billy Preston shows up, and they're pulling off like the plastic on it, and you hear this incredible sound, and here's the Beatles just being like, whoa, that sounds incredible. That's way different than the models we'd heard before.
They had the Hohner. They had a Hohner in there, and they also had used Wurlitzers before.
And so each one of them each philosophy, the Rhodes used tuning forks, right? The little small tuning forks. The Wurlitzer used reeds. Yamaha, Kawai, they used strings like the piano, of course, because they made pianos as well. But the Fender Rhodes, used pickup technology that was similar to the pickups on a Fender, and so that's kind of where the name Fender is makes sense on that instrument. But really, you get this whole new class of instrument that was very popular, and kind of when people hear it, they think, oh, 70s. They think immediately.
What's beautiful about this instrument is that a lot of the players that I knew, I wasn't one of them. But if you had a CP-70 or the CP-80, which was the 88 key one, around the time that these first came out and got popular, there was also another Yamaha product that came out that was getting extremely popular, but a little bit unknown. But if you had one of these set up and you had a CS-80 on top of it, that meant you had a Rhodes and some kind of ARP keyboard or two, or a Moog. But this stacked with a CS-80 was every keyboardist's dream setup back in the late 70s and early 80s. I knew very few guys that could afford that kind of stuff.
Well, how much was the CS-80 back in the day? It had to be.
They were around $4,000 or $5,000 unit.
Now they're $25,000.
They're extremely expensive.
25 plus.
These were around the same price,
around
35.
And so one of the reasons too. So what happened to the electric piano?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. So it's pretty obvious, and you'll be able to check in some of the B footage and photos that we have of this. If you were to go through and have to manufacture one of these today, you're looking at some really hard cost. You have a complete Yamaha piano action, either in the 88 or the 73 key version. That right there has to run at least a couple $1,000.
Yeah, at least 2 or 3.
And then you have to have a balanced, even though it doesn't have to be high quality wood, it has to be something that is extremely stable. So it's not only serves as the key bed, but it also serves as the foundation for the bottom of the instrument.
Otherwise, it's misaligned a little bit, and the way you strike the hammers will be
precision,
different.
you need so much in the top part is where all the precision, all they have to do is match the top, which is all the strings and the dampers with all of the action components. And then that gives you access to the tuning block and all of the electronics on one piece, and the other side is pretty much just a physical keyboard. And you don't have to turn it on a play. You can still hear through vibration. But in getting back to it, you still have to have a stereo preamp with a tremolo unit. And these are analog electronics. Even if you did it now with, it wouldn't have this true sound, but it would still cost you enough to put together a preamp EQ. And then you have, instead of 3 strings on every treble note, you have 2. And notice that almost more than half of the strings on here are wound strings. You only get into the unwound single strings up somewhere around the A440 on up.
And that's very different than a grand
That's
piano.
very different than almost all grands and all spinets, because spinets have enough length in them. So this harp is actually designed shorter than a spinet. And the way the strings are wrapped are designed so that they move at the same frequency as, say, a 6 or 7 or 9-foot piano.
And then you think about all that put together, the cost goes up pretty significantly. But you also
got to put a guitar pickup underneath every one of them.
But also you think about what you get at the end of it. You get a very unique sound.
Similar to a piano sound, but unique in its own that became desirable. I mean, ask Phil Collins on his piano playing. I think that's the only keyboard he ever had access to.
Well, I think at a certain point, analog sounds, especially on an instrument where it's not cornered. You're not pigeonholed into a certain sound. But that's, I think, the perception.
Yep.
The perception is, well, then it's just this one thing that has pickups on the strings, and like that's the only thing I can get. What if I spent $4,000 on a workstation? We're here in 2021, and we're if this manufactured with a price tag on it, let's say, is $59.99. So you're spending $6,000, which I think is, that's a conservative estimate.
I don't know if you could cram one of those into that price at this day and age.
It would probably be more expensive, but let's say it's $6,000. Think about what $6,000 can get you on the digital.
Ooh.
And on especially with modeling and some of this technology that's coming out with Roland.
Absolutely.
And just what you're able to get for that price these days. And it's interesting because usually one of the bulkier sections of those instruments is the electric piano sounds.
But do they play as good as this?
They don't. And so that's something it's lost in the I feel like you get 70 to 75% of the sound of this, and it plays like 50 to 60% of as good as this.
It's not 100% real thing. And I mentioned Phil Collins. He actually wrote all his songs on this because he had one at his house because he just loved the action more than any other keyboard. And
it just sounds cool. You flip on the tremolo switch and the whole thing just kind of comes alive. And it's unlike anything that you've ever heard because it's a blend of you're hearing strings in front of you, you're hearing the sound coming off the preamp. You can EQ the unit, you can EQ the amp you're running through, and
effects loop too.
And it's something that it's sad because eventually it's going to be very hard to get your hands on things like this. And there are companies these days that are making replica Fender Rhodes and replica Wurlitzers. The Wurlitzer 200 I have one at my house. It's one of my favorite instruments, and it's unfortunate because the remakes are not the same.
Same thing.
They're not the same thing, but they're also 4 to 5 times as expensive as going to try and find a used one that needs a little bit of work, maybe needs a little bit of love, but really once you hear it, there's really nothing like it.
Once you get them cleaned up and working right, dude, I mean, you're never going to want to part with it. I mean, we start a series on electromechanical pianos. Starting with this one, you bring your Whirly in and we'll chase down a road.
Yeah, and so
get a clavinet. And
we want to we're going to be collecting some electric pianos just to kind of have them as, hey, let's A/B this against some of the greatest, new digital pianos that are coming out. Are they able to replicate the sound of an electric piano? How close are they? Is it almost there, or is it still have a long way to go? But it's unique. I feel like we could do a whole video series on the smell of electric
keyboards.
pianos. My Wurlitzer, once I start playing it, it's like some foul smell comes out of it a little bit.
It's the glues or something.
And it's just like I'm just like ooh, and it's just interesting. But that's some of the beauty of it. You get they don't make them like they used to.
No.
And specifically in the electric piano line, it's sad that they're hard to find these days, and I see the price increasing on them dramatically in the next couple years, just because I think people are realizing, like vintage guitars, there's a scarcity to it, and there's something, and I would say even more in the electric piano, there's something different with this versus the new ones.
Oh, there's an appreciative playing audience. So like we now live in a day and age where most musicians are familiar with these keyboards but have never played one. They use the sound off of another digital piano or something like that, or a synth. But when you actually come across one of these and you get to play one, it almost is mesmerizing, because you can say this is a lot more magical than just dealing with the sound of this thing.
And to end on, I think why there's hope for these and the collection of them, I would say that YouTube in general has been a lifesaver for this, because for a long time, people were afraid to touch vintage instruments because they're like, well, I don't know how to fix it. I don't know, like the way anything breaks on this, it's like, it's scary because it's like, I can't find the part. And the internet has really opened up the playbook on like, okay, this is the schematics for it. If you ever needed it, here are how you could fix it. This is how musicians had been fixing it on the road, because, when something broke on you on the road, there's a makeshift way to get it working again. And the access to parts, the access to informational videos on here. How do you tune your Wurlitzer?
Right.
How do you fix some of the reeds on it? It's all very easy to find now, and that's hopeful, because I think that was one of the reasons people stayed away a little bit. They're like, well, I gotta have like a guy who knows how to fix this.
Right.
And I think electric pianos, once you break it down, is it's not an electronic like your iPhone, opening up your iPhone and trying to fix that.
Nowhere near like an iPhone.
And the fact that it's mechanical in its nature, even though it has electronics in it, is something that is a good thing.
There's something to be said about a true tone generator instrument, as opposed to the digital ones that are reproducers.
Yeah.
They get the sound and give it to you and make this as real as possible. And with an original analog instrument, it's all built into one. And that's why they're unique.
Yeah.
The CP-70s, the Rhodes, the Whirlies, the Honors, the Clavitors, they're all unique.
Well, great. We're going to end with some playing as well. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. We will be making more videos on the electric piano. This right here is the CP-70 from Yamaha. They do have the CP-80, which was a bigger key bed. We're very excited to have the Wurlitzer here and the Fender Rhodes very soon coming to you. So make sure you're subscribed to check out those videos. Thank you guys for watching.